Sunday, the 14th of November, when the parson heard the catechism at Cattald, and Emil locked his father in the Trissa hut. Autumn had arrived, and the days grew greyer and darker at Cattald, and in the whole of Lonnenberger, and the whole of Smarland. "Oh," said Lena, when she had to go out into the farmyard when it was still dark at 5 o'clock in the morning. Of course she had a lantern to light her way, but it gave out such a lonely, pathetic light in all the surrounding gloom. Grey, grey, the whole autumn was one long grey weekday, with only an occasional party or catechism hearing to brighten up the darkness. Of course you've never heard of a catechism hearing, but in those days the people were supposed to know the catechism and the stories of the Bible quite well, and so the parson had to hear people every once in a while to see if they really did know them. Not only the children, who were always being heard for something, but everyone in the parish, both young and old, had to be heard. Every farmer in Lonnenberger took a turn holding the hearing at his farm, and even if the actual hearing wasn't much fun, the feast afterwards always was. Anybody who lived in the parish could come, including the old folk from the poorhouse. Everyone who could possibly hobble always did come, for when there was a catechism hearing, you could eat until you burst, and everyone enjoyed that. One day in November there was a catechism hearing at Cattald, and that cheered everybody up, especially Lena, for she liked catechism hearings. "What I don't like is all the questions," she said. "Sometimes I hardly know what to answer." And it was true. Lena didn't know much about Bible stories. The parson was aware of that, and he gave her very easy questions, for he was a kind man. Now he had preached often about the Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve, the first people on earth, and he thought that everyone must know that story by now, including Lena. So when it was her turn to be heard, he asked in a friendly way, "Now, Lena, what were the names of our first ancestors?" "Thor and Freya," said Lena promptly, and Emil's mother blushed with shame because of Lena's stupid answer. You see, Thor and Freya were two ancient Swedish gods whom the people in Smarland worshipped long ago in heathen times, thousands of years before they'd ever heard of the Bible. "You are a heathen and you always will be," said Emil's mother to Lena afterwards. But Lena answered back, "Everything is so jumbled up. How am I expected to know who comes from who?" But the parson was kind during the hearing. He passed over Lena's stupid answer and went straight on to tell how God had created the world and all the men who live in it, and how remarkable this creation was. "You too, Lena, are a real miracle," the parson assured her, and when he asked whether she had ever thought about it and whether she didn't think that was a remarkable thing that God had created her, Lena said she did think so, and then she added, "It wasn't so remarkable to make me, but I think that all the curls and the squirrels in my ears must have been very difficult to make." Emil's mother blushed again, for she felt that the whole of Cattald was disgraced by Lena's stupid answers. It didn't improve matters when a ringing laugh came from the corner where Emil was. Poor Emil's mother, for you weren't supposed to laugh at catechism meetings. She sat there feeling ashamed and couldn't relax until the hearing was over and they could go and start the feasting. Emil's mother had made all the good things that she always did for her parties, although Emil's father tried to put down his foot. The Bible stories and the catechisms are supposed to be the important things, not the meatballs and the cheesecakes, as you seem to think. "There's a time for everything," Emil's mother said. "There's a time for catechism and there's a time for cheesecake." Yes, indeed, there was a time for cheesecake, and everyone at the catechism hearing at Cattald ate and enjoyed themselves. Emil also stuffed himself full of cheesecake, covered with syrup and cream. Then, as soon as he had finished, his mother said, "Emil, be a good boy and go and lock up the hens." The hens scratched about outside all day, but at night they had to be shut up in case one of the hungry foxes that came sneaking around came. It was almost dark and it was raining, but Emil was glad to get away from the stuffy room and the chatter and the cheesecake for a while. Most of the hens were already sitting on their perches in the hen house. Only lame Lotta and a couple of other hens were still scratching about outside in the rain, so Emil shooed them in and fastened the door. Now the fox could come if he liked. The pigsty was next to the hen house, so Emil looked in on Piggy Beast for a moment and promised him some titbits from the evening's party. They always leave lots on their plates when they're full, the greedy pigs, said Emil, and Piggy Beast grunted in agreement. I'll come back later, he said, and then he fastened the door to the pigsty. Beyond the pigsty was the privy. That's what it was called in those days. That's not a rude word, but the privy at Cattle was had an even more polite name. It was called the Trissa hut, because a farmhand called Trissa had built the little necessary house a long time ago in Emil's grandfather's day. Emil had fastened the hen house door, and he fastened the pigsty door, and now, just to do the thing properly, he fastened the door of the Trissa hut too, which was thoughtless of him. He should have realised that if the door was unfastened on the outside, that must have meant that someone was inside. But Emil didn't stop to think. In no time he had fastened the door and danced off, singing loudly as he went. I've fastened here, I've fastened there, and now I've fastened everywhere. His father, who was in the Trissa hut, heard the cheerful song and foresaw the worst. He jumped up and tried the door, and sure enough it was shut tight, and Emil's father bawled, "Emil!" But Emil was already too far away, and singing his song, "I've fastened here," so heartily that he couldn't hear a thing. Poor Emil's father, he was so furious that he almost choked. This was absolutely awful. How on earth was he going to get out? He hammered wildly on the door. He thumped and beat, but what was the use? Then he began to kick instead. He kicked the door until his toes curled under, but it held firm, for Trissa had done a first-rate job when he had made the good solid door. Emil's father got wilder and wilder. He clawed frantically in his pockets for his clasp knife, as he was sure he would be able to carve a hole big enough to stick the knife tip through and poke open the door. But the clasp knife was in the pocket of his work clothes, and today he was wearing his Sunday clothes. For quite a while after that, Emil's father stood and hissed with fury. No, he didn't swear, because he's a churchwarden. But he hissed a lot about Emil and that wretched Trissa, who hadn't made a proper window in the Trissa hut, but only a narrow little opening high above the door. Emil's father glared at the window, which was far too small, and then he gave the door a couple more kicks. He ground his teeth in fury as he waited bloodthirstily for someone to come. It's going to be just too bad for the first person who comes, because I'm going to murder him, he thought. This was very unfair, and not at all nice of Emil's father, but you must understand that he was very, very angry.